Bragg's theory of the Trump prosecution looks to be weaker than we even thought. We now have David Pecker back on the stand, and we had a sidebar that took place where one of the government prosecutors from Bragg's team went up, talked to the judge, and there was a conversation about what the predicate offense is for Bragg's prosecution. And remember, they're charging Trump with falsifying business records. And the only reason this is a felony falsifying business records charge is because they say he intended to violate another crime. Well, what was that other crime? No one knew. There were 4 different possibilities until we landed here today. And now we know, because of this sidebar, that they're talking about conspiracy to promote or prevent an election, which is 17152 in New York. Now, it is a misdemeanor. We're going to come back to that. They're using another misdemeanor offense to turn what is an original misdemeanor offense into a felony. Weird, right? We'll talk about it. We've got Inner City Press, who is going to be reporting on day 6 of this for us. And so we'll see what he has to say, and then we'll wrap up this segment with the take from Matthew Whitaker, who's commenting on how Biden is orchestrating this whole thing. It goes through Matthew Colangelo, as we've talked about here many times. And so what is this predicate offense conversation? Well, Lisa Rubin, who does reporting for MSNBC, she was there, and she posted this today. She said, you know, Bragg's office has not previously identified with any precision what the crime is that Trump allegedly was intending to commit. We had no idea what it was, which is strange because it's hard to prepare for a defense when you don't know what the crime is that they're saying you were charged with. We have no idea. There was 4 possibilities. They didn't really tell us, and the judge said, you'll figure it out at trial. We're in the middle of trial, and we're just now learning about this. So the DA's office has not previously identified this. This is from MSNBC, not some right-winger. She comments for Maddow, saying, we don't even know. We don't care as long as they're going after Trump. Was allegedly, they say, Trump was allegedly intending to commit or conceal by falsifying business records. We didn't know what that crime was until now. Here's the story. During a sidebar about the relevance of Steve Bannon's requests of David Pecker, the government prosecutor Steinglass admitted that New York election law 17152, which prohibits conspiracies to promote a candidate's election through unlawful means, is their, quote, primary predicate, right? Now, when we were here before on opening arguments in the day preceding, we kept hearing them talk about conspiracy. And we go, well, that's strange, man, because there's no conspiracy charge in the indictment. So why are you talking about a bunch of allegedly criminal conduct that you didn't even charge? Curious. So now we look up this other offense, 17-152, which is going to be their predicate offense. So this whole thing is relying on this. And remember, falsifying a business record is generally a misdemeanor until you falsify it with the intent to further another crime. Then that elevates it into a felony. And from that felony, right, now you extend the statute of limitations in this case. If they couldn't do that, they could not bring this case. If there was a limited statute of limitations, it would have expired a long time ago because the allegations in this indictment are from 2017. So fast forward however many years, a misdemeanor, it's clearly expired. You could make the argument that a felony is expired, but we had 2 problems with that to extend the statute of limitations. One being COVID, which allowed the criminal justice system to just extend statute of limitations, and Kathy Hochul did that. So it extended and prolonged the statute of limitations. And the other was when Trump was president, there's argument by New York law that it tolls the statute of limitations. So they add the COVID order plus the presidency plus the fact that this is no longer a misdemeanor and has been elevated into a felony. That gives them the ability to bring this case. So they're strapping on a bunch of stuff together. It's like, man, there's a lot of duct tape on this crap case of yours. But they did it. Now we find out that the crime that they say Trump intended to commit also is a misdemeanor. It says it's conspiracy to promote or to prevent an election. Any 2 or more persons who conspire to promote or to prevent an election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, and which conspiracy is acted upon, which is why they keep saying conspiracy, by one or more of the parties shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Do you know why they didn't charge this misdemeanor? Well, because the statute of limitations is expired. It's too late. If they say all of this business transaction was in furtherance of some conspiracy, they could have charged it, but they didn't do that. And why do we have statute of limitations? Why do they exist in the law? To prevent this type of garbage from happening. Last thing you want is to wake up 20 years and to get a speeding ticket from that cop from 20 years ago. You go, what? Why am I getting this ticket now? Like, well, you voted the wrong way last election. You're like, what? And so the government just comes back and dumps all these charges on you. Or prosecutors get to hold things in their back pocket 10 years later and then bring the charges out. We want to incentivize justice to be done expeditiously. We want to accelerate it so it goes quickly. You don't get to delay. It'd be like, what if you got a DUI and they didn't charge you for it until 15 years later? And they're like, well, we tested your blood. You're like, you've had my blood in evidence for 15 years and you just tested it? No, that's not valid. How about no? We want to accelerate, preserve evidence. So New York law says if there's a conspiracy, you've got 1 year or whatever the misdemeanor statute of limitations there is to bring it. And they didn't do it. So now they are creating it and they are not even charging it. So Trump is charged with a fake misdemeanor that has been escalated into a felony in furtherance of another crime that is a misdemeanor, which would have a similar statute of limitations as to the original charge. Okay, so we're like back to zero again. We're back to the original misdemeanor level. So it's ridiculous that we're even here. It's like dividing by zero, and they're doing it to get around the statute of limitations. It's pretty sick. But we now know what the theory is, and we now know why they're bringing in this other person who is not even a party to the charged crimes. Remember, once again, that Trump has been indicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records. 34 counts, all felonies, all related to payments, allegedly, from Trump to Michael Cohen that he reimbursed or whatever he did with it to Stormy Daniels. Nothing about David Pecker, Karen McDougal, AMI, National Enquirer, none of that. But they have to talk about all this stuff so they can fill out that conspiracy for, again, a non-charged crime that's also a misdemeanor. How wild this whole scene is. And so we're back in court. We've got inner city press reporting. Judge Juan Mercan invites the jury back in. The jury is in the bench, in the panel. And Judge Mercan calls back Mr. Pecker, reminds him he's under oath. Jury comes in. Government prosecutor says, hello again, Mr. Pecker. And we're talking about Bragg's Pecker because Alvin Bragg subpoenaed him and he's Bragg's first witness. So if we're confused about whose Pecker we're talking about, it's Bragg's Pecker. We were talking about Bonnie Fuller, says the prosecutor. Do you remember Bonnie? Yeah. Okay. And are you familiar with this woman called Trish McAndrews, Mr. Pecker? And he was, once again, from the National Enquirer, AMI, allegedly the guy who was facilitating the so-called catch and kill operation. Pecker says, you know, I recognize the name, but she was your assistant, Trish. He goes, oh, yes. I only call her Trish, so I didn't know Trish McAndrews. I'm like, what? I just know her as Trish, yeah. So not remembering the name of your assistants, that's not going to go over very well there, says the prosecutor. What about Mr. Trump? And Pecker says, well, he's over there in a blue suit. You know him? He says, yeah, he's right there, blue suit. Looks at the president. Okay, yeah, there he is. And how was your relationship with Mr. Trump, says the prosecutor. He was pretty good. He says, I proposed to him that we do some sort of a Trump-style magazine. He liked the idea and so on, but he asked, who will be for it? You know, who's going to read a Trump-style magazine? Who's going to want to read that? And you had this conversation with him after you bought the National Enquirer? Or how was your relationship with him after you bought the National Enquirer? Pecker says it was pretty good. You know, we were friendly. Mr. Trump introduced me to people in New York and we hung out a bit. And what about The Apprentice? He says, yeah, that and The Celebrity Apprentice too. He says, if someone was going to be fired, Mr. Trump would give me the information first. It was good for my magazines. I'd leak him the information about who's getting fired. He says, you guys were pretty close, right? Yeah. What would you call him when you talk to him? David Pecker says, Donald. How often would you speak? Oh, I don't know, monthly or so. Did all that change in 2015? He says, yeah, actually, I saw him more frequently when he began to run for president. We suddenly would start to speak every couple of weeks then. And did you speak with Mr. Trump's secretary called Ronna Graff? Yeah. And how about his bodyguard called Keith Schiller? Yeah, both of them. Thank you, Mr. Pecker. Government prosecutors continuing. Mr. Pecker, tell me, when and where did you meet Mr. Michael Cohen? Oh, that guy. At a bar mitzvah, I'd say around the year 2000. That was when Mr. Trump introduced me to him in 2007. Then Mr. Trump introduced me to him in 2007. He said Mr. Cohen lived in one of his condominiums. And Mr. Trump told me to tell Mr. Cohen when there were rumors about him. So Trump says, just, you know, if you hear anything about me, just go to Cohen. Cohen will figure it out. And from 2015 to 2017, Mr. Pecker, how often would you speak with Michael Cohen? He says, well, I speak with him more. I'd say every week, sometimes daily. And do you know Hope Hicks? Yeah, I do. She was Mr. Trump's communications director. She also worked for Ivanka's beauty business. And once Mr. Trump ran for president, our magazine would then sell the best with him on the cover. Every time we put him on there, man, they just fly off the shelves. People love the guy. He was seen as the boss on his show. And we did a poll. 80% of the readership of the National Enquirer wanted him to run for president. It's crazy numbers. Matt Lauer did an interview of him too. And Michael Cohen invited me to Mr. Trump's announcement of his candidacy for president. Says thank you for all of that, Mr. Pecker. We'd like to show you what we've marked as People's 151, Mr. Pecker. Do you recognize this document? Pecker takes a look at it. He says, yeah, this is an email from me to Michael Cohen back in 2015, June. And this is an email from me to the June 16th announcement. So maybe it's from Cohen to Pecker, an email from me to Cohen inviting me to the announcement. So maybe Cohen sent him an invite and he responded, thanks. So you were there at the announcement, were you? Yeah. And you were there when Mr. Trump came down? He says, yeah. Mr. Trump and Melania, when they came down the staircase, I was right there. It was magical. Did you attend a meeting in the Trump Tower in mid-August after that? He says, yeah, I did. Michael Cohen told me the boss wanted to see me. That's Trump. They asked me what my magazine could do for the campaign. And so I saw we could publish positive stories about Mr. Trump and negative stories about his opponents. And I'd notify Michael Cohen if a woman's story about him was being sold. And so Mr. Trump was known as the most eligible bachelor at the time. He was dating the most beautiful women. Government says, oh, thank you for that, Mr. Pecker. Did the names of Bill and Hillary Clinton ever come up? This is 2016 era. He says, oh yeah, Hillary was running. And there was Bill Clinton's womanizing, which of course she enabled. So I said I'd cover it. And our readers loved it. Mr. Trump was pleased that I'd do it. Michael Cohen too. He says, perfect. Now, did you believe it was helping you sell magazines? He says, yeah. And I needed the help. And did you discuss this with anyone else? He says, I did. Who was that? Dylan Howard. I told him, let's keep this all quiet. Why'd you tell him to keep it quiet? He says, being a tabloid company, we had leaks. We didn't want anyone else finding out about this. He says, I want to show you some more of this. Puts it up on the screen. He says, are these a series of pro-Trump headlines, Mr. Pecker? Up on the screen, we see one is Dick Morris. Dick Morris is writing a column or something. He says, how Donald still trumps the polls, from Dick Morris. Trump's attorney says, Your Honor, we'd ask for a limiting instruction on this one. Judge says, you're right. Jurors, we're just reminding you these are not being offered for their truth. Okay, so we're not saying that you should believe that Trump still trumps the polls or that this makes a point. We're just showing you some of the things that he did. You recognize these? He says, yeah. David Pecker says, Michael Cohen would say, we would like you to run an article against, let's say, Ted Cruz. Then Michael Cohen would send over some negative information. Michael Cohen told me he was not with the campaign at all. And what did you understand to be the relation between Cohen and the campaign? Trump says, objection. Merchan says, overruled. Sit down. Pecker says, well, Cohen was physically there in Trump Tower. I mean, he was there at the campaign office. And the government says, well, thank you. I'd like to introduce these articles. Now, I show you these headlines, Mr. Pecker. This one says, bungling surgeon Ben Carson left a sponge in a patient's brain. You recognize that? Yeah. Here's another one. Ted Cruz shamed by a porn star. You recognize that one? Yeah. Did you run these in the National Enquirer? He says, oh yeah, we did. Yeah. We would send the PDF to Michael Cohen, for pre-publication, see what he thought about it. How about this one? Did you do this one? Donald Trump blasts Ted Cruz, his dad, for photo with JFK assassin. Yeah. Zodiac killer history. We don't know what the true story is there. Ted Cruz has never been proven in a court of law not to be the Zodiac killer, so who knows? Did you publish this? Pecker says, oh yeah, we did that. And how about this one about Mark Rubio? Senator Mark Rubio's cocaine connection. Sniffing away. Did you publish that? Yeah. And was Rubio gaining in the polls? He says, I don't know, I guess so. And how about Steve Bannon? What was your relationship with him? He says, I sent him a bunch of Hillary articles to his apartment somewhere on the Upper West Side. And did Steve Bannon ever pitch articles to you? Objection. Overruled. Did Steve Bannon ever ask you to run any article? Trump's attorney said, objection, Your Honor. May I be heard, please? They go up to the sidebar. Whispering ensues. They can't get over it. Judge says, jurors, we're going to have to discuss this, so step out for a minute. Enjoy your break. Jurors leave. And now we're back on the record. Trump's attorney, Emil Bobe, says, Your Honor, this line of questioning is ridiculous. It's eliciting hearsay from Steve Bannon. Shout out to War Room. He's not alleged to be a co-conspirator in this case, so why are we even talking about him? There's no conspiracy charge in this indictment at all. Government says, Your Honor, we're eliciting a verbal act. We want to know what Bannon asked Pecker to do. And the government says, this is going to come up again anyways. Bannon's name is all over this case. Judge says, all right, I know what I'm doing. Bring in the jury. Now, please be seated. Mr. Steinglass, prosecutor, back over to you. Government continues. Okay, Mr. Pecker, when you were CEO of AMI, did the business records include invoices and non-disclosure agreements? Your business records? Yeah. And have you reviewed the records, including emails in this thumb drive? Yeah. And were they collected pursuant to a search warrant? Yes. And I offer these exhibits, Your Honor, 154 through 170, 179, and the A exhibits 171 to 178. Trump's attorney, objection, Your Honor. Sidebar ensues. Judge comes out. All right, the defense's objection is noted and it's overruled. Sorry, Trump, you lose again. To the extent there is embedded hearsay inside of this line of questioning or inside these materials, we'll deal with it as it comes up. Government's asking Pecker says, have you heard of Dino Sajudin? He says, yeah, he was selling a story about Donald Trump. And I think Dino was the doorman at one of the Trump buildings. He was selling a story about Donald Trump, said he had an illegitimate daughter with a maid. And I told Michael Cohen as part of our August agreement when we had our talk, Cohen said he would verify the name, he'd call back. What happened? Well, I told Dylan we should prepare a source agreement that Dino should take a polygraph. Prosecutor cuts him off, says, what you were about to say, okay, don't say that. Don't say a polygraph. Don't say that. Cut him off. What what is a source agreement? Wow. Don't go into that line of question. Now, what is a source agreement? He says, well, with a tipster, we get exclusive rights. So we say like 90 days, we get the right to the story. Then you can talk about it elsewhere. And did you do one of these with Mr. Sajudin? He says, yes. And we arranged a $500 polygraph. He says, please don't talk about the polygraph results, okay? I just said that. Crying out loud, this prosecutor's like, I don't want him to know there's a polygraph, okay? Gosh. Says, okay. Now the jury knows there's a polygraph that you don't want to talk about. That's good. We bought it for $30,000. We bought the story. So maybe the polygraph came back and said, mixed results. We don't know. So they bought it. Now then Cohen told me Mr. Trump would take a DNA test. He's German-Irish. This woman's Hispanic. And so there's no connection there at all. Cohen said it's not him. So why'd you buy it then? He says, if it was true, it would be our biggest seller since the death of Elvis Presley. So he's like, I don't know. This guy just collects stories because you never know. It's, it's kind of a good strategy. Like you want your nice, consistent investments, the stuff that makes you, standard safe income. You want to play around with some house money, a little fun money. Maybe something hits, boom. 30,000 turns into the biggest story of all time. Yeah, it's like a good investment. It's like nothing. Okay. So he's playing around. So we bought it. We buy stories, $30,000 for a multi-million-dollar company. It's kind of the cost of doing business. So they say, okay, government now moves. We want to show you what's been marked as People's 154. This is the Sajudin contract between this doorman and your company. And it's dated on 11/15/2015. Please read it and refresh your recollection on this one. He says, yeah, okay, $30,000 as set forth below right here. We hired an investigator and we found out that the story was 1,000% untrue, like all of the other Trump allegations. Weird. So why'd you pay it? He says, well, if another outlet got it, I'd be embarrassed about that. So I show you then People's Exhibit 164. I want to show you this email, right? He might be beating him up over here. Like, you're not being truthful here. So I want to show you this email. Trump's lawyer, objection. Judge says, please approach. They go up to the judge's bench. We come back. Judge says, I'll admit it. So Trump loses. Exhibit 164 goes in. But we're going to redact some items here. Mr. Pecker, what does this look like? He says, this email requests a wire transfer and his W-9. So someone's getting paid. And what did Cohen say about this in the email? He said, lock him in until after the election. And did there come a time that you did release him? He says, yeah, Sharon Churcher was another reporter. She worked for Barry Levine, and this is Dino's release. Now, this, I think, actually supports Trump. It's like he buys stories that are not truthful, right? All the time. So $130,000 for Stormy is not out of course. I think this actually hurts the government's case. We took a polygraph, we investigated it, we bought it anyways. Even though it's 1,000% untrue, we still bought it because we just wanted to lock it up. We don't need any sudden movements, okay? Like we're about to beat Hillary Clinton here. So we don't need any weird fake stories. It's $30,000. Just lock it up. It's a smart business play. Like buy the competition before it emerges. They're saying, yeah, and we released him. It's just standard practice. So the government continues saying, okay, well, now let's talk about Karen McDougal. So we'll see if he tries to contrast this one. Says, now who is Karen McDougal then? Because we know what you did with Sajudin. Karen McDougal was a Playboy playmate who was Playmate of the Year, I think, December of some year. Not that I know. Says a Playboy model. Who was she? Well, Pecker says, well, she was a Playboy model, okay? She was trying to sell a story about a relationship that she had with Trump for a year. So I told Michael Cohen about it during our next call. He said, that's totally untrue. And I said, okay, let's vet it. Government says, did you discuss paying this? No, Pecker says. We didn't discuss paying for it. I just told Cohen we'd keep him apprised. And did you come to believe that Cohen had spoken with Mr. Trump about this? He says, yeah, I think so. I was at my biggest investor in the AMI in New Jersey. I was making a presentation and I was there and Donald Trump gave me a call. He said he'd have Cohen call me. And so I sent Dylan Howard out to California and he met with the lawyer, Keith Davidson, and someone called Karen. Interviewed her for about a few hours. So that's Karen McDougal and her attorney, Dylan Howard from AMI, flies to California to go meet with her. Now, in that time I spoke with Cohen. He kept on calling me. He was more anxious each time. And we don't know what happens next. The judge cuts him off. It's 2 o'clock. We'll break. And so they are pausing and calling it a day in court. Inner City Press reporting. Judge Mercan says, Mr. Bove, your objection's noted. I'll take it under review. Prosecution says, we'll put it in a letter and we are adjourned. So Inner City Press bringing us day 6 of this trial. And we, of course, see what's happening on the stand. They're trying to create a pattern showing that Donald Trump was engaged in this broader conspiracy, even though it was never charged, and that was enough of a predicate offense to allow them to charge this as a felony in this case. Now, obviously, this is all total nonsense. Here is former acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker talking about Matthew Colangelo and how this whole thing is being orchestrated and coordinated by the Biden administration.
The trial for me is very much barely started. The jury selection is one thing. I don't think they can get a fair jury in Manhattan, but, we're beyond that now. The opening statements, I think, framed the issues for both sides. Now we're actually going to get into the evidence. And what we're going to hear is that documents were categorized by a low-level bookkeeper at the Trump organization based on checks that the president had signed. And, I think in my mind, that's where the case sort of starts to fall apart, because they have to hang all of this behavior, all of these acts on President Trump, or he had to have directed it. And then he was president of the United States. And I can't highlight enough also that the person that gave the opening statement yesterday for Alvin Bragg's Manhattan DA's office is a guy named Matthew Colangelo. And, he was at the Biden Department of Justice. He was kind of making sure that, the special counsel was directed in the right directions, both on the documents in Florida case and on the January 6th case. Then he went to the Letitia James office and made sure that the civil fraud case was buttoned up and ready to go. And now he's over at the Manhattan DA's office. He is the connective tissue. When Donald Trump talks about election interference and directed by the Biden administration, this attorney, Matthew Colangelo, is the one who connects all of this and has really been directing traffic to make sure all of these cases proceed against Donald Trump and keep him off the election.
Yeah, that sounds like
exactly what they're doing. So Matthew Whitaker talking about Colangelo and how he's been involved in this since the inception of all these cases, all because Joe Biden trying to take out his political opponent. And we're going to be here continuing to cover this, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. Thanks for subscribing wherever it is you're watching this, liking this video, inviting a friend or family member to come on over here, sharing something with them, saying, come check out this channel. We'd be very grateful. We also have some great links down in the description below, including our members only community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, where we do member only streams in the morning, on Saturdays, and after parties. Thank you for supporting us any which way. We look forward to seeing you back here on the next one.